I'm hitting the start button, and it says we're live on our air now. I don't know where the chat is. I don't know where we're live. I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry, dear viewer. Everyone else, apparently you were all chatting very nicely, and I was nowhere to be seen. I did have to.
We liked it like that.
I was probably a lot better. It was probably a lot better.
We were splitting the profits of the reward to tell the UK police that you were the bad guy. So we were splitting the pounds and doing the conversion to pounds, euros, and New Zealand dollars.
We've even got droning on here. G36 Pilot Smile. We're now on. Well, that's good. Hello, guys. And the chat means the chat's in the right place. I don't know what happened. I'm going to blame Bruce, because in all things, it's important just to blame Bruce. It's just easier that way, isn't it?
I confess it was me.
Oh, that's all right then. Look, I even rushed to got my phone on and do all sorts of things. Anyway, right, let's turn this off. So you would, well, let's just start where you are. So you've dobbed me in. So it was me that did it. Now, what is the reward money that you're currently sharing then?
It's 50K.
It's 60K.
Is it 60K?
There's another 10.
Oh,
there's another 10 for someone.
Yeah.
Let's wait a few more hours before we tell the guys. It might get higher. It's a Christmas bonus.
Well, the image that's going to go with this is Chicken Little, and I had, before my computer crashed, are we all familiar with the Chicken Little story? And that the sky is falling in, the sky is falling in, and all I can think of for this is that is the sort of situation that's occurred. When it started, I thought, oh crikey, there is something serious going on, and they're not telling us, and fair enough. And 4 times I tried to make, I'm not like Bruce, I'm just not like Clickbait City. 4 times I sat down to make a video, and the story had changed so much. I just thought, nah, let's just stop. Let's put a hold on this and see what it all happens.
We were discussing a couple of alternatives, and one of the alternatives was that perhaps someone didn't want to work on Christmas.
Do you know what? That is exactly the sort of thing I would have done when I was on shift when I was 18, not wanting to work in Scottish. I would have done something like that, and knowing my luck, it would all have gone horribly wrong like this, and the SAS would have turned up and lots of soldiers. So yeah, and hello Phil, hello Kurt, and Kurt says always blame Ian. Well,
yeah, I noticed that.
That was my first idea. Then, as you were late, it just shifted to you.
Yeah, fair enough. So what do we think? Has it been just an almighty cock-up? Was there ever a drone? All right, and my theory, because obviously I wasn't there for what you guys are talking about, my theory is maybe there was somebody there on the first night. Although on that was, I understand it was windy and rainy on that first night. So that's my although. But let's suggest there was someone there on the first night, and then every single bin bag and bird suddenly became a drone for the next few days. That's my droning on says, Ash says the drone found at the perimeter isn't related to the incident. Yeah, it probably wasn't, Ash. If you'd like, Ash, we can invite you to join if you like. Anyway, over guys, what's your other thoughts?
Come on. It's not I think we can consider this, and we can exploit this as a case study of what not to do, because we should use this as we used the plastic bags over Heathrow. And I just hope that that couple that got arrested gets a lot of money from every media outlet that put out their name and images. So that will make some the guys that think about crying wolf about drones to think about twice. And it's okay. It's like Ian was saying while we were offline, is the false accusations that someone can easily and without consequences raise about someone or something has to be justified, and if wrong, they should be made responsible for that. These things cannot go on like they are doing now.
Hasn't the horse bolted out the gate, or what are the phrases? Hasn't everybody started their Christmas thinking, oh, it was those nasty drone people, they did it, and they've gone and had their Christmas lunch, and 2 people have been banged up, and won't the general public have just moved on and said it's drones and that's that?
I'd say yes and no to that, because all you need to do is have a look at the Sussex Police's Twitter feed and see what people are sending them. So you've got normal members of the British public, and they're actually trolling the police. You know, they're sending them Christmas songs about drones, you know, various memes. Some actually using some quite fruity language as well. So generally, actually, there's been a lot of reaction of, you know, wait a minute, this is a police cock up as well, which isn't necessarily entirely fair, but we can touch on that later. But yeah, I think people have been slightly open-minded with it, and everyone, well, the vast majority of people had a lot of sympathy for the couple that were accused. Obviously, we've seen the newspaper headlines, and one thing that's naughty with that is when you do a very accusatory headline and then put a question mark on the end to pose its question to try and get out the legal side. I think really there should be some restriction on that, saying you can't just bang a question mark on the end. That's not acceptable.
I don't think it is. I don't think it's after Levinson inquiry. I don't think it is acceptable in law anymore just to bang a question mark on the end. I think that's already been removed.
If that is the case, then go, because I thought that was a little bit naughty. I mean, as we go on, we can discuss more about the press. I think there are pros and cons to it, which we can go on about later. But I think to answer your general question, there's been more positives out of this than previous drone incidents, in that, especially we've seen in the past, commercial operators, you know, just to get their own business mentioned on the news or the radio, they go on and they go, oh, drones, if only it was flown by a professional pilot, that wouldn't have happened. And instead, everyone's pulled together a lot more and said, well, wait a minute, you know, where's the evidence here? And don't be rolling out more legislation on us, because what was already being done, if it was a drone, was already breaking the law. So the legislation was already there. So if someone was going to ignore it, no matter how much legislation you put in, they're going to ignore it. And if you put in the drone database, they're not going to register on there anyway. If you have fins, they're not going to file a flight plan for something illegal. So I felt that generally, as a whole community of drone users, everyone kind of banded together a lot better than I've seen in the past. And the only separation you get from that is obviously the people that are selling counter drone, who want to go, drones are evil because I've got this system for millions of pounds that I can flog you, which is really disappointing, because whilst you should say, yes, we should have some counter drone, it's never a balanced debate, because it's obviously just their financials and money in their pocket. But yeah, that's enough for me. So someone else can
the CUAS stuff, yeah, and I'll let Bruce have a go. Yeah. The CUAS stuff either worked really well because there was nothing there to detect, so it didn't detect it, or it worked awfully because there was, as Ash is saying, 76 sightings or something like that, and it missed all of them.
Yeah. This is the counter drone thing. Yeah, it's a bit of a daft argument with counter drone to say it was a success, because we're told it didn't pick anything up, which that then means either the sightings are invalid or the counter drone worked. But again, you'd say, well, how do you know the counter drone worked if you didn't pick anything up? So I guess you could argue both ways. But I mean, I would err on the side, because of the fact there was photographers there, professional photographers with the gear, and they have stated, I was there all day and I didn't see a drone. So frankly, I don't think there was a drone, especially when the counter UAS stuff there's there. And I think that will validate it. That's what's been a naughty, what we've seen in the last few days. So up until Christmas Eve, well, in fact, just prior to Christmas Eve, obviously we had the head of the investigation saying, oh, possibly there wasn't a drone. Then suddenly he has a meeting with ministers, and ministers say that they know more about this entire investigation than him. He's silenced and sidelined. And they went, yes, we've got these 67 sightings. There must have been a drone. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. So because they then gave the media a list, and the media's like, boom, here's a list of a load of sightings. See, right. So we're like, we know. The thing is here that they probably wouldn't have realised a lot of us had caught on to what the sort of timeline. So timeline on Thursday was early afternoon. Aeroscope was there. There's another system. And in fact, I've jotted it down here. So I would just tell you what it was, because give me 1 second while I scroll. But yeah, there was a more advanced system called, I don't know how you pronounce it, Grozer S. Basically it's a truck with a radar scanner on the top. That was deployed on the evening on Thursday. But whilst those systems are in place, there was sightings, and so that says those sightings are invalid. In the evening, the army came in and they put on that Israeli system.
And then when did the Air Force come?
Yeah, and that was active then, obviously in time for Friday, where we're told there was a couple of more sightings. So again, those have got to be invalid, because we're told the counter US didn't detect them. So as soon as we started challenging, so police are being challenged, MPs challenged, say, oh, wait a minute. So you're saying these sightings are right, but you're saying the counter UAS is right. Well, that conflicts then, because we have Thursday where those two things can't be true. And then yesterday, the police on their Twitter feed said, our final sighting was Wednesday. So they've suddenly moved the
okay.
So it sounds almost like they're trying to think, oh, actually, we're being caught out here. Let's move the date. So either somebody that's in the police that's managing the information is completely incompetent, or they're trying to move the goalposts again. So that, to me, is one of those worrying signs if we can't keep a consistent story and it's changing from day to day. So, yes, there is a big question there. And I'll let someone else speak now, anyway, because I've had
Ian, can they put the results of all these investigations under confidentiality or security act that will prevent us to see the results of all these investigations in the future? Official Secrets Act?
I think, if, say, for example, you wanted to use the Freedom of Information Act, I think they would, I mean, you get everything that was very much redacted, or it would be declined.
The thing is, come on, let's assume there was a drone, okay?
Yeah.
And it is considered as a threat or terrorist threat. Just assuming.
Yeah.
Can this be placed under the Official Secrets Act and block the freedom of the press?
I think if it was genuine, they would bring information out anyway, because it would be in their interest to do so. Whether we'd get everything, probably not. I think there'd be a lot that would still, for example, I don't think we'd ever get an explanation for why that couple was picked for arrest. I mean, the suspicion is that everyone has is that, you know, a neighbour's said, well, I've got a guy around here who flies a lot of bigger RC craft, and that must have been him because he's so close to the airport. And I can't believe that someone being a window fitter would have been any reason, and that it would have been the fact that he'd been seen with RC craft in the past. But I doubt we'll ever get that kind of information unless this ends up in court and these kind of things get debated there. But I would expect you get a settlement out of court, wouldn't you, with something like this?
Hmm. Bruce, what's your thoughts? You were sending in the drone army.
Yeah, well, I think the whole thing just speaks to how completely out of touch with the real risk, and the public and the authorities and the media are. I mean, if you saw let's say you saw a Kestrel flying over Gatwick, would you shut the airport down? I don't think you would you? Yet somebody says they saw a drone and we shut the airport down. When all the information we have to date, the scientific studies which are selectively acknowledged by the powers that be, show that drones of a typical consumer type do not pose that much of a risk to aircraft, certainly passenger jets and so forth. We've had tests conducted in China which shows that a Phantom will not penetrate the cockpit glass of an airliner. We have tests conducted which showed that in order to get penetration, they had to use a 4 kg craft and shape it like a bullet before it would penetrate. All the science And all the history to date says drones don't pose a greater risk than birds. In fact, there is more damage due to bird strike every year. There is more risk of injury and death due to bird strike every year than drones represent. So why have we just gone so totally mental and off the deep end? Because somebody, for whatever reason, and it may well have been one of these anti-drone companies, these drone countermeasure companies might have thought, let's drum up some business for Christmas. I'll ring up Gatwick and say I saw a drone, and they'll buy $5 million worth of our stuff. We don't know. But where is the sort of the balance? Where is the common sense? Where is the actual science? No one's using the science. Everyone's using hysteria and emotion. There's no science. I don't think we should be making decisions, spending huge amounts of money, vilifying groups of people, arresting people on things that don't involve the science, things that are contradictory to the science. And that's what really annoys me, is that the media has done such a great job of vilifying this industry or this community, and prompted by people like the airline pilots unions, who have a great vested interest. They know their jobs are on the line. I mean, already we're talking about driverless air taxis, and how long before that becomes, you know, driverless cargo planes between places. So although passenger jet pilots may still be around for some time longer, their employment options are narrowing by the day, because pretty soon we'll have autonomous flights carrying, you know, DHL, FedEx. They won't have pilots in their planes. They'll have unmanned aerial cargo planes. And so the job options are reducing. Pilots know this. They're looking out to protect themselves. That's why they have this hymn book that says, if you see anything that could possibly remotely be a drone, file an incident report that you saw a drone. Let's you know, get these drones suppressed, because now we have the parliament saying, oh, you know, we need these stronger drone rules and we need to change things because look what's happened at Gatwick. And that's a shockwave that's echoed around the world. In Australia, CASA is introducing, they're going to put aeroscope at all the airports so they can catch these drone flyers trying to break into airspace, even though geofencing says that a drone should never fly into an airport if it's a DJI drone, and aeroscope will only work with DJI drones. So it's like, what are you doing? You're not thinking this through. In New Zealand, the Airline Pilots Association and Airways have come out and said, as a result of Gatwick, we restate our position that drones must be registered and people must sit exams and certification. To which I say, okay, let's assume this happened in 12 months' time. Let's assume this all happened this time next year, when all drone operators in the UK who have a craft over 250 grams must register themselves with the thing. They must sit an online test. Would that have changed a single thing that's happened in the past week? Would registration have solved this problem? No. Probably all registration would have done is meant that instead of arresting a couple who they know fly model aircraft, they would have rounded up probably 20 or 30 people in the area of Gatwick and grilled them all as to what were you doing with your drone, where were you? But they haven't found a drone that is related to the thing. So registration completely ineffective again. As far as the education, you know, you've got to sit an online test. If this was a malicious act, I don't think that simply sitting an online test would have stopped someone from going out there and creating mayhem if they did. So I think we need to take a step back and say, let's bring some sensible people in, some level-headed, objective people to look at the risks, and let's compare what we're doing here, because I'll go through a few steps. In 2013, the Boston Marathon bombings, 3 people died, were injured when pressure cookers were used as a terror weapon, right? So pressure cookers have accounted for 3 deaths. We have 168 deaths in Oklahoma City from a truck used as a terror weapon. In the UK last year, or this year, there have been 40,000 knife-related offences, 40,000 of them. So knives, all these things have a proven record of killing people and being used as an offensive weapon. I restate my question. How many people have died as a result of the recreational use of multi-rotor drones? 0. Yet we're spending $5 million to equip Gatwick, and we're going to spend countless more to equip all the other airports. We're closing down airports for something the size of maybe a kestrel, when we wouldn't do it if it was a real bird. Someone's got to be laughing and saying, this is outrageous. If you wrote a book, people would treat it as a work of fiction if they read this. But this is what's happening. Someone explained to me, why are the lunatics running the asylum?
Let me think like a politician. Okay, so we need to enforce that all drones are compliant to the registration law, must provide their ID on the air and all that. But we also know there are some crazy guys influenced by a crazy old man in New Zealand that build their own drones. So how can we prevent this? Either we ban that crazy guy from New Zealand from the interwebs, or we forbid all everything that can be used to build a drone. What's the easiest way? Tariffs, crazy tariffs, special import permits to motors, propellers, and all that. That's a good idea. Let's get some more revenue for the tax office, and let's get heavy taxation on everything that can be used to build a drone. And that's one possible avenue. Then you'll get all the DJI ones according to the law, and that's easy.
And here we are. We've got someone on the green screen. Good day, Greg. Welcome to our hangout. What opinion do you have?
Look, I was just going to talk a little bit about the CASA stuff in Australia, the big overreaction. Yeah. They've been putting TV commercials on the air saying, hello, we're going to go and put these drone detection systems for these aircraft in all of our airports. And it's just a total overreaction.
Well, Ash is mentioning Aeroscope in the comments, and it can be spoofed. It's been spoofable since day one. It only deals with one manufacturer, and not only that, but also that we know there are some tricks and traits to it linked to when people actually turn on their transmitters from data coming back from their ground control station. So you may not be in radio reception range of it, but you may be transmitting data to Aeroscope via other means, and that's how you pop up.
You have a look at some of Kevin's stuff, and he's been drawing pretty pictures on the maps with his little spoofing of the Aeroscopes, which I won't go into detail about, but
it's on GitHub. It's on GitHub. But the thing is, I tell you what worries me more about. I'm sorry, I'm knocking you about here, but what worries me more about this is, if heaven forbid any of us wanted to cause chaos now, we could go down to pick the name of your electronics store in whichever country you're in and buy a caseload of manually flown $50 no GPS, no whatever things, and make them fly across the fence and cause, by the current UK playbook, cause absolute chaos.
It's easier than that. It's easier. You just make a phone call and say, I saw a drone flying over Gatwick. You don't even have to have a drone.
You're right. You don't need or some lights. I saw some lights in Reigate. And funny enough, that lights one, I was sitting down, pull up a sandbag, here's a story. I was sitting down to make a video at that time. And I thought, well, I better rant. Bruce has had a rant. I better have a rant about this. And so I realised it kicked off again. I just saw it on Twitter. So I started recording the ADSB feed from the UK. And I saw the police helicopter departing Lippets Hill, I think it's called, north of London. I saw it heading south, and I saw it spear off towards Reigate. So that helicopter must have been dispatched to the lights on top of the crane. So it was madness, and that was 20-30 minutes on Friday night when they had stuff orbiting and diverting all over the place just after they've reopened. I've forgotten the timeline now. Anyway, I'm going to stop ranting. That was a dull story. Come on, someone else pick it up.
I'd love to know what Bruce would say about what do we actually do, right? So I heard his commentary about building a SWAT team, which is great to respond, but what is the ultimate solution? I mean, the Aeroscopes of the world are not going to work. How do we actually respond, or do we just ignore it?
But again, we haven't quantified the real risk. I mean, we're assuming that if a drone is out there, planes are going to hit it, people are going to die. But that is at odds with experience today. It's at odds with most of the true scientific studies and tests. So why are we responding to the wrong problem?
And if I agree with you, let's say I agree with you. So what is the answer to actually make the rest of the planet understand that drones are not the evil thing that they think they are? What do we do? Is there a different detection system where they can say, okay, now we know that there's nothing there? Or I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
There is no easy solution, because we're not dealing with a problem that is anything other than hysteria. How do you Valium? Valium or sodium pentothal or something. So all we can do is just dose all the MPs, dose all the pilot union heads, and just get people back to a sense of calmness and reality. And remember, keep saying the one thing. Whenever someone brings all this stuff up, say, can you please remind me again how many people have been killed by these recreational drones? These ones you say are killing people by crashing into airplanes. Can you give me the final death toll as of this moment? And if they say 0, then you have just made the case completely.
What we do need, though, is we do need a process. I mean, one thing that Gatwick has shown is there isn't a robust process in there, because it's like, so we've had these sightings, so you say, where's the video? Where's the photos? What drone was it? You know, was it a plane? Was it a quad? Was it a hexacopter? Whatever. Now,
it was an industrial drone.
So, go on.
It was an industrial drone. That's what we know. Industrial drone. We don't know what that is.
They're the same, but we've got no description of it. So now,
come on, why do you need all the details? It was a drone, and it was industrial, and it was operated by an evil genius, according to the guys from that drone something from UK.
Yeah, the point I'm getting at with the description is you're proving that somebody has actually seen somebody and understood what they've seen. Because as we've seen already, member of the public's called it a crane. We'll probably find out that a lot, probably all of the 67 sightings are helicopters, planes. I mean, to give you an example, and there was going to be thrown up, there was a professional photographer down at Gatwick. He flies drones himself, and he called in a drone report, having looked through his camera, and so presumably he has a degree. Yeah, he'll have zoom lens. So he's looked through it and thought, actually, that's probably a drone. Got into the police, but then when he's properly looked at it, so I assume he's taken it off, put it in his laptop and seen it on a full-size screen, he'd realised it was a plane, it was at a distance. Because it's at a distance, it just looks like it was moving slower. So then he calls the police and said it was a false one. But that experience that he shared proved that even somebody that's experienced with drones and has a zoom lens could still make a wrong identification.
Come on, we all know that
it's proven.
At 100 meters, it's just a speck in the sky. At 200 meters, let's assume you're outside the airport runways. At 200 meters, it's not much. You just see a speck. So you cannot identify if it's a quad, a plane, EXA, whatever. You cannot identify it.
Yeah, that's why you have a process. So someone can say, I've seen a dot in the sky. I can't identify what it is, but I know something's there. And then you escalate that to another stage where someone's then got to establish what that is. So obviously now, if we've got these counter-drone systems that we're told can spot it, then it's use that. But, you know, why isn't there... Because obviously people say, what about the CCTV? Well, any CCTV around Gatwick's going to be concentrating on doorways and the car parks. It's going to be about crime prevention and so on. But you should actually have some high-powered cameras that are actually elevated position that you're used to look up at the sky, that have got, you know, some kind of night vision, whether that be black and white and, you know, just high sensitivity or something more advanced. But you should have a number of escalation points of that. It should be, there's something there, and let's try and establish what it was, and then let's react from there. Because otherwise, you
already have that escalation. You already have that escalation. You just say drone.
Yeah, at the moment, it doesn't work. Someone says drone, and then it's boom, everyone panics, and it ends up being ultimately closed down. So what we need is something where someone can evidence that and say, we've got enough here that makes us concerned. Because I can understand what Bruce is saying, where you're saying, because if someone's going in there randomly by accident or it's a flyaway, the chances of actually there being an accident are probably very slim, because you need those to collide. But the worry that the security services will have is if someone went in there to deliberately strike an aircraft with a drone, you know, that's a different scenario. So to being able to be sure whether there's a drone there or not there is something that we need to have anyway. And I think Gatwick's highlighted that. So I don't really have an issue with that in itself, but I do have an issue with the process we've got there, because I think the concern is that there was, you know, that potentially either there was just a drone there once and this is just blown out of all proportion, or there was never one there at all, because there isn't a process that ever proves there was a drone that was there. And that seems ludicrous. You can close down an airport and you can't even describe what was there or have any evidence it was there in the first place.
Well,
I mean, to your point, what are the penalties for doing a false report? I mean, how do we know that the initial reports weren't malicious reports from someone who did want to take a day off or whatever?
Well, that's the trouble is we don't, and then that's the problem. What we need as well, actually, to counter it's a very good question. That is, we need for a false report of a drone to be considered the same as putting a bomb threat. So if you put in a bomb threat to an airport, would be the same as if you said, "I've seen a drone and it's not there." If you actually had a penalty, a consequence, people would think twice. So then you would certainly only be getting very genuine reports that were coming through.
Yeah,
and people are allowed to make a mistake. You can make a mistake when you make a report. That's okay in life.
Get your cell phone out of your pocket or stop texting for 25 seconds. Aim your phone to the drone and snap and put it on Instagram.
How hard
is that?
Well, the response would be, though, that, look, it's so easy to make a mistake. Look, pilots have sworn black and blue, they've hit drones, and it's been just structural failures or shopping bags. So if pilots, these highly trained professionals, can make a mistake, surely someone in the street can be forgiven for making a mistake.
The thing is with pilots, though, it isn't necessarily a mistake. It's just, it's what's happened now is the UFO tick box. He said he's getting drone. It's basically, I'm not sure, so that'll be my default position to go to. I think it's probably unlikely a pilot's hit something and definitely known it was a bird, for example, and ticked drone. It's probably more of well, that's the safest one to go for, maybe.
I've had people contact me and say that there is a dictate within the pilots' unions that anything that they can't, or that might be a drone, should be reported as a drone, even if you're not sure. That's basically something that they've decided to do.
Which, it's not right. It should be accurate.
They report UFO. They are considered mentally unstable, right? So.
Another story. Let's pull up a sandbag. About 1985, working on a radar at an airfield in the West Country in England. And the guys at the top in the glass bit said, is there anything out to the north of the airfield? What do you mean by that? Well, there's a really, really bright light out to the north of the airfield. And we're just wondering if you're seeing anything. And we said, no, there's nothing to the north of the airfield. So we said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll pop up the stairs and we'll have a look as well. And we all went up the stairs from the approach room and had a look. And my word, there was a very, very, very big bright light up to the north moving through the sky. And we had no idea what it was. And on that night in 1985, from RAF Chivener, the leader of the watch put UFO sighted in the logbook. And that's at the heart of this. There is the SATCO, the Senior Air Traffic Control Officer, on duty that time, will have had to make a report in the log, and he will have had and his decision-making process, it will be something like received telephone call, said it was a drone, and then he will have had to detail his thought process all the way along, all the actions they took, and that's what I'd like to see. Now, I've had a look at a Freedom of Information request to NATS, and I shall read it now because people will shout, I don't, but NATS is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act of 2000. So I'm not going to get to see that. But that is part of that, and I love hearing UFOs mentioned again, because it's sad that we're not getting UFO reports anymore. The number of UFO reports.
A few weeks ago. I was quite surprised to see pilots reporting a UFO a few weeks ago in the media.
Oh, was it? Oh, that's good. Yes, that's the ones over over Ireland, wasn't it? Yes, and they all saw something shoot past them, didn't they? Yes. Now, Ash has said in the comments that we're not mentioning if a drone should hit an aeroplane and go through an engine. Yes, it might knock down it. It might not cause a huge amount of damage, but it is going to cause pain. It is going to cause service intervals. It is going to cause all manner of trouble for that aircraft. Of that, there can be no denial. But the way the police framed this was, as Louis suggested, it was a professional drone, a large professional drone, and it was an organized event. That it was, well, do we actually know that did someone, a real grown-up, say it was an organized event?
Yes, that was definitely the impression that was given at first. I mean, I think everyone have been really cautious about what they were saying, especially with that, because the first few days, I think everyone took it on what we were being told on the TV. I think everyone was very cautious about what they're saying, was accepting as fact that there was something going on, because thinking, you know, maybe this is a terrorist attempt, or we told eco warriors, or someone that was unhappy with the expansion of the airport. So from what the scenario we were being told, it seemed fair enough. But obviously, as time's gone on and more facts come out, or lack of facts, it looks less and less credible.
Yeah. Did you guys also have reports about multiple drones in the air at the same time? Certainly, I was hearing that in the press over here.
Yeah, they were saying 5 on the first night. So you sort of had this storyline in your head, I suppose, that these things were sweeping across the airfield in a coordinated manner.
So it was intel.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
AI. There were no people involved.
And Ash again has mentioned the eco warrior thing. The madness of that is, so an eco warrior, that would be somebody that's trying to protect the planet, is worse than a terrorist in some ways. Somebody that was trying to take an airplane. Anyway, I thought that was very weird. And also, you kind of knew the reporting was a little bit duff, because when the address of the people was found and shown because they put a picture up, a lot of newspapers reported that they were 5 miles from the airfield. Now, if you go tippity tap into Google Maps and go round, they're 5 miles from the entrance around the front all the way around, but they're actually less than a mile from the airport in a straight line. So that was definitely no, they weren't. But anyway, what a terrible Christmas they've had. BMS Web says, I think the multiple drones were multiple birds flying in formation. Yeah. Who knows what it was? So what messaging have we got now for the general public? Do you think we're going to have enough sympathy from them, or is this an uphill battle now?
I really think that the news will come up again when the first money is going to be paid to that couple. And I really hope they squeeze all the press outlets for 150K each, or whatever it is, for each media outlet that publish them. Then we'll get this thing, and people will start thinking again on pointing fingers, because 150K all, it's not much. 150K each would be a nice one.
But do you think they're going to get any media coverage of that? It'll be a little footnote at the bottom of the back page.
No, I really believe that if it is one, it will be just a footnote. If it is 1 times 150K per media outlet, then it will be enough money to justify headlines.
Yeah, but they don't want to incriminate themselves. You know, when someone complains to one of the publishing tribunals or broadcasting thing, and they get ruled against, and they have to publish a retraction or something, it's always in little tiny writing way stuck in the middle of nowhere, so that they've done it. Technically they have complied, but they haven't actually, because the stuff is, no one's ever going to read it. The media is not going to write bad things about itself, and that's the big thing I found with this. The media was completely, ears were closed. I contacted so many media outlets and said, please give us some balance, please try and be more objective on this story. You're only presenting allegations as fact, and it's, as a responsible media outlet, you have a job to present both sides in balance. I never got any response at all from the media. They just, all they were doing was chasing those clicks.
I would say with this story, though, the story of the couple's kind of become a story in itself, much as like with the Cliff Richard. So I'm with Louis. I think if there is payouts, it will be made as a story in itself, because, to be honest, that recoups you back some of the money you paid out, because you get a story and you get your clicks, you get your advertising money. So maybe it will be covered. But yes, it could go either way. So we can only say time will tell on that.
Yeah, but just because the BBC were found to have defamed or done bad things to Cliff Richards doesn't make me want to rush out and watch Summer Holiday again.
You'll have to now. I'm sorry, YouTube will demonetize this because you've said that. So you have to now go and watch that. I guess Sir Cliff will be on our backs if we're not careful. And oh, that's a bit libelous. Anyway, moving on swiftly. So all right. So that story will get tidied away because they'll get their money, and then that'll be some joiny positive press. What as an industry how do you want to stand up and shout at the police and air traffic services at Gatwick? Because surely we do, or don't we?
I think that the police, the way they've handled it, they definitely deserve some comedy ribbing on Twitter, and they definitely deserve being on the end of some memes. But that aside, I think the police are being used as scapegoats. I think we've got the issue is whatever's happened at Gatwick and the processes and procedures there, and that's the root cause of this and where it started from. If you said to any police force, we need you to investigate a case where with no video, with no county UAS, with no photographs, so we've got 67 witness statements of people that don't know potentially anything about drones and could have identified anything. How are you going to prosecute that and ever find anybody responsible? It's so little data to go on. You know, there's talk about Scotland Yard taking it over, but if that's all they've got, Scotland Yard would struggle. I mean, to be honest, it isn't just Sussex Police that's there at the moment. They said there's 7 forces involved now, so it's just being pinned on them because they're the voice of it, and obviously we've had the U-turn on them saying possibly there was no drone there. So, yeah, go on.
The first report I've seen was the airport director or spokesperson of the airport saying that 2 workers of the airport had cited the drone. And in my impression, and from the gathering of the news I've seen, that was the initial report. All the others were whatever. But the airport spokesperson or the director or CEO of the airport, whatever he is, on his public statement, he clearly said it was 2 workers of the airport that had reported. So that was the initial statement, right?
I couldn't say off the top of my head what the initial one was, but I do know that they have included airport workers and even a few police officers. There was one where they said the drone had winked a light at them, which, yeah, again, it doesn't really make much sense. I mean, we saw, for example, someone had seen a light in the sky and it looked like it was the police helicopter with its flashlight on, looking for something, and they mistaken that to be the drone. So maybe they've seen that at a distance. Because if you have a flashlight on, and if you actually panned round, it might look like it was on and it was off. I don't know, but yeah, there's nothing that's detailed enough to know. You know, was that a drone? Was it a helicopter? Was it just a mistaken? But yes, amongst those to justify it, they say amongst those we have some airport workers, we have some police. So on that basis, it must all be true.
Well, I don't think I wanted to go down the line of the industry wants everyone prosecuted. I think what I didn't articulate very well, a miscommunication, I believe the phrase is in this on this occasion, is that really I think. I don't suppose they can make the procedure public, but we need to know that there's a decent procedure, as you've said, Ian, to sort all this out, and due process has been gone through, and it's not all come as a bit of surprise to the airport. I'm a bit worried that they didn't have anything in place. Let me just read it. So, yes, CUAS failure. Where are the industrial UAV photos? Well, of course, if it wasn't there, there's no photos. False flag. Yes, it is silly.
I could do some renderings. What's some renderings?
Yeah, well, I know. They'll be fantastic.
That was that meme on the internet of a guy that picked up an old photo of Gatwick and said, "A nice day to have a flight over Gatwick. Strange that there are no planes moving."
And Mr. I Am Pete says, in a way, I think if the police find too much about what hobby DIY drones can do, it'll all just be banned. Well, that's exactly what kicked off all the trouble in America in 2007, which caused the 2008 closing down, basically, of the emerging drone industry, when they did indeed see model jets. They had no idea. Was it the FBI? That's the big ones there, isn't it? They had no idea about model jets, and they immediately wanted them banned when they saw them, and then they saw Bruce's videos, but they immediately wanted them banned. And then if you've got a long memory, you'll remember, I haven't got long enough memory, they fitted up a chap with some C4 and a Model F4 jet, lots of fours in there, a chap that had never flown.
It was only a ducted fan, it wasn't a real jet. It was just
was it electric? I can't remember if it was EDF, but anyway, he'd never flown RC in his life, but they paid for the plane, paid for the C4, and he said, look how dangerous these things are. Let's ban them. So, yeah, you're kind of right, Mr. I Am Pete. When they find out, they do worry. And as you say, the possible reason for this unfounded UAV sightings, obviously, it's the weekend off. It's the weekend off, and it could be an honest mistake. It could be an honest mistake.
This is the plot line for Die Hard 5, just like Die Hard 2. Everything gels. It's just the same.
Yeah, well, if it is, so that's why I want to see the air traffic log, because if it was a phoned-in report, what did the SATCO do? What was the next action to confirm that sighting before shutting down the airport for so long? Ever had to make a £10 million decision? No, not quite that much, but I had to make some quite expensive decisions, and give the airport managers a break. I'll give them a break if I see the log and I see what the decision-making process was, and then if it's held up against his or her peers, then we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
It's all mentioned to procedure. What is the procedure for reporting?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the procedure? Cry wolf and shut down everything, no matter what.
Lots of girly screens. They're just lots of girly screens.
Heathrow is larger than Gatwick. So what would happen if we would have Gatwick and Heathrow shut down at the same time?
I have a feeling you'll see the report, and the SATCO rang management, the CEO or whatever at the airport, said, we've had these couple of reports, and I have a feeling it'll be shut down from above the SATCO. No, it can't be an easy decision.
Yeah, Gary, I'm just curious, in the UK, who is it that is responsible for doing the report in the UK?
Which particular report?
Well, the report of the incident overall. Like, you want to get access to the logs. Who is it that is going to be doing an official report from an aviation perspective in the UK? And have they commented?
It'll be the senior air traffic control officer on duty at the time, or the watch manager at the time. And no, I haven't seen anything. But as I say, NATs are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, according to my research. So we'll probably never find out.
Now, the real question now, though, is what will happen next from a regulatory perspective? Because I don't believe these anti-drone systems, these counter-UAS systems, are worth a bean of salt. I don't think they work. I don't think they're very good. Well, obviously, if we believe what we were told in the Gatwick incident, they don't work. They couldn't detect these drones flying around. So the government is going to be stuck with a very difficult decision. We have a threat that we cannot effectively counter. What can we do? All we can do is ban it. And I really wonder if they're going to say, well, we're going to ban these things except for, it's going to be like a firearm, probably even more controlled than firearms. And in the UK, firearms are pretty heavily controlled. You may use this on your own property as long as you are so far away from a built-up area, but you may not operate anywhere else except prescribed flying areas, and then you have to be registered and you have to set a certification, and it could just completely kill this whole community, and therefore really have some impact on the industry, just because we have a bunch of politicians dressed in girls' panties who scream at the drop of a hat and don't understand the science and the facts behind things.
Well, I was going to say, just last Christmas, Nats had their what was it called? The drone run. Do you remember they had that online competition where you flew a drone and you flew the quad and you got prizes and everything, and there was a poster, and there was last Christmas. There's a song about that. There was a whole education piece which hasn't come out this year. I'm a little bit disappointed that they haven't done anything similar. And this year, we've just sort of jumped to the apocalypse situation at Gatwick. There's quite a contrast.
I think they did the same, but much cheaper. So they didn't spend 1 cent or 1 penny on advertising and got all the free advertising they wanted about the safety of drones. Just cry wolf.
Yeah, well, Ash says you can't take a firearm anywhere near to an airfield, but you can fly a drone straight into the engine of an idling jet. Well, the Sappho guys, I don't know what they call them these days, the bird scaring guys will have had shotguns on the airfield, and I can't remember what the rules for that are, because we just used to ask about. But I think it's something like you're going to be 100 feet away from aircraft and buildings and people, or something like that, when you're doing the bird scaring, and you can shoot the birds. So that was also a bit of a mystery as to why, if they were there, why the police then weren't allowed to use shotguns, but why the bird scaring guys on there didn't use shotguns. There's just a whole load of nonsense connected to this, really, which needs to be explained. I think the industry should demand, both the private and commercial flying should demand a proper inquiry into this as to what happened, and not to bang anybody up, not to cause trouble for people, but just an honest explanation of what happened, and where possible, so as not to reveal security stuff that they wouldn't want revealed. Tell us what happened.
But as we know, politicians are not the brightest people, and their general response to things that they can't manage is to simply ban them. And I really think there is a possibility of that, an effective ban, not perhaps a total ban, but effectively an effective enough ban to really, really cripple the hobby.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you think like a politician, the easiest way is just ban everything that allows one to build a drone, and then only the approved drones of a commercial provider are allowed to be sold, and those will come with a lot of restrictions like they have now.
Well, I do think, well, that's part where I forgot, that's where I was going with this last year's NATS and CAN and all that good stuff, was they're kind of very much on our side. And unfortunately, one of the downsides of this year of 2018, I think, is politicians have put their hat in the ring of this game. They finally think it's a vote winner or whatever, or something popular to get behind. And I think, unfortunately, aviation authorities and sensible heads are being driven out the room. And as I say, I suspect the SATCO might have said, whoa, something's happening here. What should we do? Just punted it up higher to a higher floor, and a higher floor, perhaps a little bit political, just said, shut it down. Whereas there might have been another solution if it had stayed in air traffic. No one was. And Ash says they'll never ban drones. That's ridiculous. They didn't ban cars in the early days, but they did introduce law and regulation around their use. Well, we've got law and regulation around their use, but what we don't have is enforcement of those laws and regulations.
To be honest, cars isn't a good example, actually, because there was knee-jerk legislation around cars at the time that put us about 40 years behind the US. That was the red flag in front of the car. So our motor industry did actually get crippled at the time. Whether that will happen here, I mean, I don't think so much, because I can't see them cracking down on commercial operators, in that they have a lot to jump through already. But I mean, I could see bringing forward the legislation that was planned for November, and maybe it will be even stricter, because obviously there was the consultation behind that as well. So a lot of people would have put their thoughts in about the fins and so on, and who knows, maybe they were going to decide on something that had a bit more compromise, where we'll probably see that all unlikely, that everything will come in its strictest form. Maybe time will only tell with that, so it's too early to really speculate. I mean, some people have said, oh, this has just been done to bring in more laws and legislation and restrictions. It's like, well, no, because all that's coming in anyway. It's all kind of a matter of time. So no justification was needed to do this. That's kind of just conspiracy theory.
But Ian, you say the commercial people have enough hoops to jump through already, but it was an industrial drone. We were told so it was them, wasn't a recreational hobbyist. The other thing is, did you notice that in the halls of power, they're talking about increasing police powers? I mean, that was said by the politicians. We're looking at increasing police's powers. So again, it doesn't bode well.
I mean, that's the trouble, is that what this has shown is the police have far more power than they need already, by the fact that that couple were arrested when there can't have been any evidence there that was damning, otherwise it wouldn't have been released. You know, if there was so much evidence, they would have realised they had a rock solid alibi already. So yes, there is concerns over that, because that was one of the things that was mentioned in that consultation, was about the power that the police will have about seizing drones. So yes, I think police will be given more powers, but as we've seen, the truth is, with something of this scale, they don't need any more powers. There's always something they can fall back on as a justification for taking action.
Interesting to note the feedback on some of my rants. There seems to be a lot of people in the UK who have very little respect for the police. Is that just because I attracted a load of nutters, or is this the case, Ian? Are the UK police losing the respect of the public?
It's quite commonplace now. People are pretty disconnected from the police for a number of reasons. For one, a lot of the day-to-day crime that affects us, like burglary, police just aren't that interested. So if you get a house gets robbed, it's virtually unheard of for the police to ever recover your stolen goods. They don't turn up if there's if you crash into by an uninsured driver, which is a clear crime. They're just not interested in turning up unless somebody's actually being injured. So that in itself, and then to be honest, that's blamed on austerity now, but that had happened well before austerity started. So that's put a big disconnect with the police. And I can't really think of any other thing that's probably got the public disenfranchised. I think that's really the main thing, that we just don't see enough of them, and we don't feel that if we're a victim of crime, they'll be there to help.
Yeah, well, there's hardly there's hardly any of them left, is there? That's the trouble. I know you say austerity, but they'd already, before austerity proper, they'd started closing down police stations at night. I think near my parents, I think it's about 10-15 miles to the nearest police station now. So then they're not there. I feel very, so they're between a rock and a hard place, aren't they? Turn up on a wet and windy night and see if you can spot a drone. That's what they had to deal with there. They wouldn't, no gear, no stuff. What are they going to do? They've been told, now just look at the sky while it's raining. I feel sorry for them, but I do. But then again, I feel sorry for that couple. So I'd like to see on what grounds they went into there, but I don't suppose we'll ever see that. Just the very fact that they had the RC helicopters, and his neighbour probably dobbed him in for a 10K fine. Hopefully that, and I think Cash made the comment in the comments earlier, hopefully whoever dobbed them in will be receiving some sort of punishment, or I don't know what you get for that. Because again, you could just be mistaken, couldn't you? It could be an honest mistake. You could genuinely have thought that person. Without malicious intent, should I say?
No,
I don't know.
It can be.
I think
it can be something as easy as someone calling the police and say, "Hey, my neighbor has one of those drones," and the police just went ballistic on that, and the guy just told the police that his neighbor had a drone. And the police went ballistic because they were triggered by the word drone. So they went and drone, go. And didn't think, they didn't have to think it. So it can be something as easy as, hey, my neighbor has a drone. And that,
yeah,
I suspect with that maybe the RC helis has been a factor in that, and the neighbour will have said, "Oh, I've seen him with drones, including some very big ones." I mean, obviously we could differentiate between the two, but I noticed with the media they were all, "We want the big helicopter picture," because I'd spoken to a couple of people in the media and said this guy flies, as far as drones concerned, 250s. that you know, he doesn't fit the MO, and they didn't want to know. And it's all, oh, have you seen the size of this helicopter? And it's like that were the pictures they wanted, because it looked big and it looked scary. And so maybe that's what's been the.
But once you had his name, it only took 5 minutes on Facebook and a few other places and a little bit of searching to see his comments on the Align website and other things he'd done. It didn't take long to work out that he didn't have anything autonomous, or
no.
well, not that we knew, of course, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen him posted on groups, and on a couple of groups I post on for well over a year. So I was aware he was just FPV, 250 class, some of them even smaller. The model I noticed he was last with was some model called, he says, looking for it now. I've got it. Oh, I don't know how you pronounce it, if it's Isheen, but it's a QX90. It looks very small.
QX90 is something this size. It's 90 millimeters. It's 90 millimeters.
I mean, his even comments on it were about flying it around inside his house. So the last thing I could see in a comment was binding that with a Turnigy controller. So he seemed a nice bloke online and was just flying smaller stuff. And so, you know, he wasn't on any of the RG pilot groups. So there's just no evidence of him progressing from that onto something bigger or autonomous. So straight away, just thought, this guy doesn't look like what you'd expect. Because as soon as I heard the media things, I thought, if we look this guy up, he's bound to have, you know, big rigs, S800 size stuff. And that's the vision that, you know, I think everyone had in their head at that point. It's like, no, I think they've got the wrong guy. And I know, like Gary, myself, and a few others were on Twitter on that very evening saying, this just doesn't look like the guy. There's too much here that just doesn't add up. So it was good that we were proven right. And it's just the thing is with the press, they just looked at his Facebook feed itself, because they wouldn't have had access to any of the groups, because obviously all the groups you tend to be on tend to be private groups. But when you kind of move in these circles, you kind of get a feel for what people are like. You know, he wasn't one of these argumentative types. He wasn't posting YouTube videos of, look at this stunt, look at me flying over London or whatever. You know, there's a lot of other people that if the media had gone and said, oh, we've got this person, we're thinking, oh,
yeah, that's well, yes, I think there were a few names bandied about thinking, oh, when's the video going to arrive on YouTube? Yes.
Just about what happens next, I've been doing a little bit of digging in the background, and NATS, I don't think, has an exemption from FOI. I think they're trying to hide behind the CAA's exemptions, but they are qualified exemptions, and generally public interest tests do apply. So there's a real possibility we can get to see that data. Yeah,
I'd like to. Well, yeah, they're going to use security. That's bound to be used because you wouldn't want to, because obviously they really did have a plan for what happened when they had drone sightings, and that's what they rolled out. So we can't possibly get to know that, or maybe they didn't. You know,
the best one I've heard, it was Mrs. May that launched the drone scare notice to get everyone off her back during Christmas. So it's also a possibility.
Yes, and Ash is making the fair point that Ian Huntley, a terrible thing in England, didn't look like a child murderer. It's not about how somebody looks or posts.
That wasn't the point being made about look. The point was being made entirely about their postings, the gear that they had, and their attitude. You know, for example, if someone's you can tell someone's, you know, people will argue and say, well, I'll fly my drone where I like. You know, there can be a reckless attitude to it. It wasn't one of those. And I think from me, I mean, it's just people saying it'd been like BMFA. And I think the fact of a lot of RC flyers, you do understand the value of the gear that you're flying, and that, you know, if you crash it and what it costs. And I think a lot of the new drone users, as we discussed before, don't necessarily. And that's where you do get a bit of a different attitude. So I think when you're looking at the MO of someone where they say, this is somebody that's, you know, got a grudge, is building big frames with lights on and so on, and it's like he might be autonomous, that's why we're not being able to get him. If someone's not building autonomous stuff, is only building 250s and only ever discussed FPV and that interest, then obviously it's a very different. It's, you know, at the end of the day, it's an MO. You know, it's like, what did they fit into that description of the drones being flown? No, they didn't. The gear didn't, and that's what it was about.
Well, none of us are policemen or investigators. So it's very difficult to quite be able to pin the tail on this donkey, isn't it? But well, whatever. It was 36 hours of arrest, and they got released. Police investigators, Osborne joined police investigators never stop journalists from submitting photos. I know. I will. I know.
One thing I've got to look at while we've been chatting was the discussion early on about where the idea came from, that it was a, I'm trying to think what word we'd used earlier on about whether it come from the police or the media. Give me a second, I'll just scroll up and find it. But I've looked just to the police's Twitter feed and what the police have actually said that I can find, and what the media have said.
While you're scrolling, I'll see something that somebody said the helicopter from Lippets Hill only took 11 minutes to get there, and I thought, wow, that's a bit quick, and that's why it wasn't stationed there, because I'm surprised they didn't leave it at Gatwick once it was kicking off. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. I better check that. And it is. It's 13 minutes, so only 2 minutes out. So they're hiding in those tweets and around were people that were on top of the game and probably part of it. So it was all being watched. Is that giving you enough time, Ian?
I don't know if it has. There's been that many comments, actually. It was something to do with whether it was a concerted effort or not, or whether it was a deliberate effort. The police themselves have said it was a deliberate act. They've used drones, plural, and they had said that the drone had potentially been modified. So that's as much as the police have said, but then that's been taken further. So it doesn't look like the police had suggested the Eco Warriors or Gatwick. It looks like that's been filled in by the press. And I can't see there, although it might just be a quote, so it might be why not, but I'm just looking for the industrial, because that was earlier on, so that could have been said by someone on the police, but it hasn't been on like the official press.
Gary, it would be nice. It would be nice to get that gentleman that said that it was a genius operating the drone, because that gentleman has a website, has a company, and come on, we are all preaching the same music. We are just singing the same tune. So perhaps that gentleman has some more information that he can share with us. So it might be a good place, a good guest to a future podcast.
Yes, we must look for that. You must send me the link. I've forgotten that already now. Ashen, hi, I'm not going to say it. Hi, someone else there in the comments. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that. Do you think are we making the situation worse now in the way that we're talking about this now? Do you think we're scaremongering, or are we having the right conversation, or is this completely the wrong conversation? I'm interested in your opinions.
I believe that perhaps we should discuss this seriously, because this is a real example of what might happen anywhere in the world, because someone can come up anywhere in the world and do the same. So let's stop these stupid actions with reason and get a good clarification. Remember the Heathrow plastic bag? How long did we hear the drones over Heathrow? And a few months later, we got it was a plastic bag. So we have this, we have to explore this, and we have to get our ears on the ground and hear what's going to happen to the money that those people that got arrested going to receive. That is a good point to be aware and publish that as soon as we know something concrete about that.
Well, we need to definitely be part of the solution, don't we? Because everyone has a hat in the ring one way or another and are passionate about it. And yeah, you actually claim the drones are harmless, and they're certainly not harmless in the hands of people that and this has completely quashed the really good news story, which was those guys. I've forgotten the name of the company with the two-way drone delivery in Vanuatu. The vaccines, they're going back and forth. It's completely. This is destroyed. That was the
drones in Indonesia right now that are doing the surveys to help out to reach to any survivors in the tsunami in the Indonesia. It's drones that are doing that job.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah. So the drones are safe narrative just makes our community look stupid.
I've not seen much that drones are safe. I think I've seen, certainly what I've seen is been fairly balanced, in that people are saying that, what we've been dealing with is hysteria. And I think the voices have generally been fairly calm, certainly in commercial groups. And I mean, even here today, there's no hint of that actually trivializing the risks from drones at airport. All of us agree they shouldn't be there. I think the issue there's been in this case has just been the fact that it's not been evidenced and it's not been communicated well. And I think that's all people have been wanting from the authorities is just straight answers. If they came and said, here's counter UAS tracking, or here's some video we've got. This is the model we're looking for. This is some intelligence we've got. This is the person the kind of person we're looking for, all this information. And just so far, the very fact they've even said, there might not have been a drone, it just suggests a level of disarray, confusion, and contradiction. And that's the issue here. And that's obviously where people have come up with, a bit of conspiracy theories, or there's lots of stuff bouncing about. But that's just been fed by the poor and contradictory communication that's been going out over the last week.
And I think also I want to see a better response. I mean, the response we've had has been terrible. There's nothing that the government has suggested or anyone suggested that is going to effectively deal with this problem. As we've already discovered, registration would have been completely useless in this situation. Doesn't do anything. Education, in the case of a malicious incident, that does absolutely nothing. So the government's approaches seem to be, we're going to register, we're going to give the police more powers. But how would any of that change what's happened in the last week? We need a solution that would prevent, or at least rapidly respond to and mitigate the risk if there is a risk. But I've seen no sign of any of this happening.
I think the one mitigation that's being put there is we're saying that we're going to have the rollout of the counter UAS, which isn't there at the moment. So at least that is going to give an additional tool for airports.
But we've seen it doesn't work. We were told that these systems were there and they didn't see the drones.
We don't know that. I think that'll because the sightings are wrong. I think it's fair to say, yes, aeroscope, that isn't the one to go for because it's only DJI. And then if someone hacks a DJI, it might not be sending out the drone ID anyway. So if we get one that's generic, which I think is a suggestion, that can pick up any drone, then it's not an issue. I can't see any issue with that, because if anything, it might actually be a benefit in the long run, because they might actually say, well, we've had this at our airport for an entire year and we haven't even seen a single drone, and then that will then prove the narrative whether it was right or wrong in the first place.
If I put my management hat on for a minute, the old people process technology. Process, we've already agreed, you mentioned before, Ian, needs to be looked at. The technology, that can be improved. But what about the people? Does there need to be a response qualifying, as you said before, Gary, that a bomb threat is a serious matter, and if people are reporting these things willy-nilly, I think the UK government and the police force need to say, hey, this is no different to reporting a bomb threat. They need to get some serious tone around it so that it doesn't happen again in the future, if it was indeed not a qualified report in the first place.
Agreed.
EMP, it's all about EMP. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Let's have some more of that there, EMP. How did you set plastic bags? I know, James, Well, but people are queuing up to be providers of electronic ID for the drone community. They are willing these processes to be put into place so they can make a tiny bit of money out of the system that they use to detect your thing. And of course, then you're going to be in your unified or unmanned traffic management system as well. That'll all go in very nicely indeed. But I suppose to me, it still comes down to what does the SATCO do with that report when it comes in? Because you'll have all the systems and they'll all be sat, all these fancy counter UAS systems will be sat there, but someone can still ring it in. So what's he do with that report? How's he verify it? I suppose if the counter UAS system says it's not there, continue flying. It's got to be something like that, because you can't. People will be stopping airfields all day long, and as Bruce correctly said, only with a telephone call. You don't even need the equipment.
And I wonder, are these counter UAS systems like those bomb detectors that they sold to the people in, was it Iraq? I mean, I have my concerns about this counter UAS stuff.
I think, to be honest, at the end of the day, you can prove that, can't you? I mean, if you've got any nous about them, if you're spending this kind of money, you'll be doing a test. You know, you would fly.
But they didn't test those bomb detectors until way after the event, did they? How much money did they spend on those things?
To be honest, in that wasn't so much the UK buying them; it was foreign countries taking the UK on trust that it was made here. It must be legit. I would hope there would be the testing around it, so you would fly some DJI products, you'd fly some Pixel products, 250 races, and all on different frequencies and so on, and then you would actually document that. There needs to be, as with any system that the government buys, there needs to be a testing regime and somebody that signs that off and says yes, it is fit for purpose. And once we get that, and the suggestion is we do have that, so we can only take the word of the powers that be. But if we do have that, then great. I mean, my feeling is actually it could be a positive thing and prove that, in fact, there's far less sightings than there's made out to be at the moment. So you never hear about sightings that could appear at Leeds Bradford Airport. I don't hear the kind of drama that you hear down in London. So it'll be interesting as well to see that sort of the national picture.
James is mentioning that. James is mentioning that drones don't need to send a signal; they can be fully autonomous, so it needs to be radar based. Everything makes noise. Everything makes RF noise. The motors make a noise. The gimbal makes a noise.
The inverse square law means you don't pick it up from far away. And the thing is, if you go to radar systems, how many flocks of birds are going to be identified falsely, or how many individual birds will be falsely identified as drones? As I say, this whole technology sounds great, but when you get down to the practical nuts and bolts, there are so many ways to circumvent that kind of drone countermeasure, and there are so many ways in which that drone countermeasure technology can be just too sensitive and produce too many false flags. So then again, it does boil down to having that process in place where all of these false flags and so forth are properly handled and filtered by human beings rather than AI and blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, there was one comment that you all liked that was on the register. It was great. One of the first comments they had was someone had said, obviously in sarcasm, but said, "Well, can't they defeat these drones with blockchain?"
Yes, I saw that. And people are saying in the comments it's about education, and that I suppose is our piece in all of this, is we have to be responsible users and help with the education piece.
And that makes what we are all educated. We know that the drunk driving is not a good thing, but there are people that drink and drive. And
also, you've got the whole thing. Education doesn't stop malicious people from doing malicious things.
Yeah, for sure. But we're going really around the house, aren't we? And we've got to remember how this was framed at the beginning. This was framed as an organised attempt with multiple aircraft. I could see it being one. I could see somebody flying, as I said at the beginning, I could see somebody flying across the airfield, genuinely being there on a rainy night, and that was the first one. And then it was Chicken Little, and it went nuts from that. But it certainly wasn't what was billed. I think we can agree with that.
You could be right with education, Gary, but I'm not talking about educating drone users. I'm talking about educating the public. I'm talking about educating politicians. And I'm talking about educating the people who have to respond to these things. And that boils down to, let's actually quantify the risk and let's deal with it appropriately. You know, as I say, the risk of knives, 40,000 knife attacks in the UK last year. Why not focus on that? You're going to save a hell of a lot more lives than just when people decide to upset others by flying drones near airports, if they did.
And it's worth adding that the education side is already dealt with, and that is part of the registration system. So we don't know exactly how in depth that will be yet, but it will be registration and a test combined into one. Or that's the way it read on the tender that was put out on the CAA site. So I think it'll be a case of you'll be registering and you'll answer some questions. So then at least they'll know you're not a numpty. So they'll be checking that you know not to be within a kilometre of an airport, or if that changes by then, and so on. So there will be a degree of education there. So someone won't have the ability to say, well, I didn't know that, Governor. No one ever told me, because you will have had to click through that at very least and acknowledge that you understand. And
of course, by November, you'll have all those dogs trained over there to bark at the thing.
Bark and scare away the drones, yes.
Yeah, you have all that done as well. That was extraordinary, wasn't it? That was actually. How can we? I should say, how can you compare knife attacks with drones and assessing risks? That's the kind of narrative that makes us look silly. Well, there we are, Bruce. But then Bruce is not.
No, it doesn't. It is a risk. Everything in life is a risk, and you look at where you spend your money and where you get your return. If we can slash the number of deaths caused by the recreational use of multi-rotor drones, if we can slash that by 50%, then it's worth every penny, isn't it?
That's why you when you're a commercial operator, you have to build risk assessment matrices and mitigation measures and all that so you can be able to operate on almost anywhere in the world. And you create those risk assessment matrices and all the risk mitigation measures, and you just operate. That does not happen to recreational flyers, and I'm not sure it should be made compulsory to recreational, but the laws are going towards having a default risk matrix to all users, and it's a shame because it will stifle the innovation and the usage of drones as recreational tools.
Yeah, we've already seen that we have rules in place to help mitigate or manage the risks associated with this activity. If those rules are properly enforced, everything should work just fine. We have a lack of enforcement, and therefore it becomes a personal responsibility for people to make sure they follow the rules. That doesn't work in almost any other part of society. If it worked, we wouldn't need road traffic police, we wouldn't need other police. So what's missing here is the policing of these drone rules. I think we have to agree that people can do just about anything with impunity. And so maybe instead of focusing on anti-drone technology and countermeasures and all this stuff, just hire a whole lot of people to go out and make sure that the rules are followed. And the problem, I think, would fade away.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the problem we've got at the moment is the CAA were originally responsible for the prosecutions, and then although they couldn't do many because of obviously the resources that they had, but they did actually happen. Whilst it's been with the police, yes, there have been some, but you know the volume is so small. Like last year, it was 2 for England. I mean, it's to the point where really we could do with the government putting some resource aside for just a dedicated police team. It doesn't have to be many coppers, you know, even just a couple that are there to deal with drones that could maybe even be used nationally. So any force that needed their expertise and for them to actually put together a case could do so. I mean, to be quite honest, they could just sit all day on YouTube and come away with hundreds of prosecutions at the end of the year if they wanted to. But I do, as I mentioned before, actually, I do think there needs to have a discussion with YouTube and blatantly illegal drone videos. If they were taken off, it would actually stop the incentive for a lot of the idiotic behaviour. So I would like to see that as, unfortunately, it's not even one of the things that's discussed, but I would like to see.
You're trying to kill my channel.
No, well, not your channel. Yours to be exempt. No, to be honest, though, I don't think you're the kind of person that's saying, here, you know, deliberately do something illegal and, you know, this kind of race against one person's trying to outdo another. You know, I can go further than you, I can go higher than you. To just bring a stop to that. And the monetization side of it, you know, that's an incentive of, you know, we could do with taking that away. I would like to see the police be able to act on those videos as they do when a motorcyclist or car drivers posting videos of them breaking the law. And obviously, if you've got genuine reports that are coming through by phone that need the police to look at them and deal with them seriously, that they get dealt with. I mean, we've got cases at the moment where, you know, you can see any city centre, drones going through it. You'll even get, as we've mentioned, your local TV channels or sometimes even national TV channels playing those videos, and that doesn't help either. I'm kind of hoping with this being so public this time, there will maybe even be some change in the media. I mean, it was pointed out to me actually by commercial operator this week, funnily enough. I know this was kicking off this week. ITV'd seen some drone video that they liked, and as they messaged the operator, straight away they said, do you have a, you know, permission for commercial operation, which is something you don't normally see that. So it did make me wonder if this has kind of brought those kind of questions more out into the open, where the media might think twice. But we'll see. I might be just being overly optimistic there.
Well, you know, as they say, may you live in interesting times. And this was it the 20th December when it all kicked off, whatever exact date was. That is going to be a bookmark date in not only the UK but in worldwide ARP has operations, I think, and it's going to have reaching effects one way or another, positive or negative, and how we speak to regulators now. We just need as an industry to get our act together, I think, and have and speak with a common voice and push for the truth.
The one thing that's been missing in this whole thing is there's no unified voice for the drone community to respond to these allegations, to respond to the situation. We're fragmented, we are tiny little subgroups, and so we have like airline pilots unions, we have civil aviation, we have an airport authority CEO, but there's nobody there, there's no group that says we represent the recreational drone flyers and this is our perspective on it, this is what we're doing about it, and that's why we have no balance in this whole reporting situation.
And partly I think that's why DJI had sponsored that node organisation to maybe be that. Well, we'll see how that goes. We
was BMFI.
Yeah, I mean, DJI just aren't active enough in Europe and haven't cared enough about this market, especially here in the UK, to deal with some of these issues, which is unfortunate. And now I do know actually that commercial operators have already begun, and funnily enough, one of the guys is a admin on the official DJI Facebook, and there's a few others are drafting a letter to ministers, and there's one operator I think that's he must be in some groups close to the government that said he can get it to the right minister or MP, whichever it is. So there is a letter being written to deal with the collective concerns, that there isn't knee-jerk legislation and so on from what we've seen in Gatwick. There's also a national drone group that looks to be being tried to be set up now. I don't really know details about yet how it's going to be funded and so on, but there is talk, and I think that's come out of the guys behind the approved drone pilots commercial site, which is kind of a free register where there's a lot of commercial users, because everyone's worried. You know, commercial users aren't just thinking, oh well, it'll just be the hobby users that clamp down on. I mean, I think that'll be short-sighted anyway, because your hobby users end up being your commercial flyers of the future. But I think everyone's worried about what will be the consequences. So we'll see what comes from that. But that was being a positive thing. So I've seen more of people coming together and speaking with balanced, sensible voices than I've ever seen before. When it came to the Gatwick bag, there was lots of hysteria.
And I believe that the same as what happened with that Dayton University so-called crash test, we'll have to resort to what DJI does and publishes and their comments on these all incidents, because they already have the media clouds that provides them airtime on the media if they come up with a declaration of some kind.
Yeah.
And it's the only voice that I see on these drone, because there are several associations, groups, special interest groups, and all that, but come on. It's DJI that if they want to put their hat on the rink, they'll come up with a press release that will get coverage and perhaps bring attention to the subject by those MPs and ministers and all that.
Maybe.
I did see one headline that they're looking at using killer drones. Where the hell did they get that idea from?
Yeah, it's just, yes, you wouldn't watch your channel. And ARPAS in the UK, and James Dunthorne's is in the comments. He's a very experienced chap, very good at what he does. Or so he told me today when he passed me the cash. But yeah, ARPAS in the UK is also, I can't remember what that stands for.
Yeah, I mean, I think ARPAS do good stuff, and it was good to see very much more considered voices on this event. I think when the Heathrow bag came about, there was less so. There was a bit of, evil hobbyists before that had actually concluded with some ARPAS members, where this time it's been very, very considered and very mature, and has presented a good image, I think, of the drone community. I think the concern is that the hobby user, ARPAS doesn't represent them. You might think that it really doesn't. Until you have a big lot of members, it doesn't. I don't think the BMFA does either, because I mean the BMFA even were doing memes after the guy was found innocent, making out that drone users were reckless and he was responsible because he'd had RC craft. And I thought, that's not the right message. That's divide and conquer, and you're being very childish. I don't know how we solve that. I do think Node's the best thing there at the moment, but I would like to see something better that especially considers the hobby side. But if it can bridge everyone and bring them together, that would be even better, because I think divide and conquer is the worst thing. I think as a community, we need to stick together and not point fingers, to have mature debates and come up with reasoned solutions.
It was interesting in the USA that the FPV Freedom Coalition's last meeting, they were all talking about advocating for transponders on drones because of the positive things. You can prove that you're a trustworthy drone operator because you've got the thing on there. But the point I raised with them is, okay, you're going to advocate that to your members. What standard, what protocol, what are you going to use? There isn't one. There isn't one at the moment. So even though you think it's a good idea, there's just, and everyone's going to be vying for that. It's going to be a real mess, because every man and his dog's got to come up with their own little special protocol with this benefit and that benefit. And so how are you going to actually get a single common standard adopted? And don't think ADSB, because it's just not fit for purpose, because you're going to spoof it so easily and so forth. So there are still huge hurdles in the way with all this stuff.
But that'll be the unmanned or unified traffic management system that data, whichever sort, is fed into, and then feeds it onto your national regulator for air traffic services. That's where that'll all glue together, and that means that it won't just be the transponder device, which will be available from multiple retailers, because authority.
Hang on a minute, Gary. You know how the aviation industry works. No one gives anything away for free. There will be a standard, and a license fee will be payable, and this is the only standard you can use. Therefore, the cost will have a 90% loading on it to make sure that the UTM company makes heaps and heaps of money from these drone operators who don't have to pay anything, but they'll pay through the cost of their transponders.
I hear whispers in the ether that the Civil Aviation Authority, well, and unfortunately, I suspect it's going to be a little bit like what happened when Brexit came along. They had to shelve a whole load of forward-thinking ideas that they had, because they no longer had the bandwidth to deal with it. And so maybe this incident will cause their electronic conspicuity thinking to change a little. But I think they were thinking some revolutionary things, or trying to, over there. But I say that might get just knocked on the head by politicians saying, "Oh, no, we can't have thinking. We can't have."
I mean, the worry is the politician thing, because I think my worry is about rushing into any technological solution, trying to deal with these issues that isn't a good solution just because it can be delivered quickly. As yet, I don't think we have on offer really the answer to drones. It's definitely not drone ID and having something that's proprietary to one manufacturer or favours them. It needs to be something that's across the board and ideally used by all air traffic users.
There's a comment about additional signals to send option signals, no additional hardware or transponder. Yeah, because that would be sending. You probably have a ground control station of some sort. Your OSD data sent somehow. You put it into a GCS, and that GCS would telephone a UTM, and the UTM would then take your track, as it were, and put it into the system. But as Bruce has said, it'll actually a standard will be demanded for that message. It will end up being a bit of a nonsense, but the technology's there. It's possible to track stuff. It's very possible.
Because the technology is also changing so rapidly. At the moment, most countries have said, 250 grams and below, we don't care. It's too small. It doesn't matter. But some of the 250 gram or sub 250 gram craft are becoming incredibly capable now. And how long before they say, well, we better make it 200 grams or 100 grams, and then the weight of a transponder becomes an issue. And it's like, I don't think we've got the right solution yet. And I know the FPV Freedom Coalition was saying, we can embed metadata in our FPV signals that come back. And so a law enforcement officer can basically get that information. And then you have the problem that, that means the law enforcement officer has to have something that can, like Aeroscope, he has to have something that can pick up this 5.8 gigahertz metadata. He's got to have something, but the cost of equipping people in the field becomes absolutely enormous. And in the case of something like a FPV racing drone, there's no GPS on board. So the key piece of data, where is this drone, simply isn't able to be relayed to a UTM. So, you're still having problems.
Can I ask you, Bruce?
Go ahead.
Bruce, just curious, if the data couldn't be spoofed, would you be 100% in favour of transponders? Is that your main concern?
Yeah, I mean, for suitable craft, a transponder on a craft that doesn't have GPS is a waste of time, really, isn't it? Because you don't know where it is. And so, yeah, for craft, I mean, and also we talk about drones. I think there's still this distinction. I fly mini quads. I don't consider them to be a drone because they have no autonomous capabilities. They can't be flown by someone who doesn't have the necessary skills and experience. But I still believe we need to have this very, very firm distinction between model aircraft and camera drones that are autonomous or have a great deal of computer aid that anyone can fly. And until we draw that distinction, I'm going to have difficulty dealing with the rules because they're applying the rules to everything. And so
there it goes, Bruce. There's that ship sailing that sailed in about 1980, wasn't it? Not something like that, wouldn't it? When the definition happened, the ship's gone. Gone, Bruce.
And if regulators are just too lazy or stupid to know or draw a distinction between the two different communities, then they can't expect to get decent compliance because they're trying to create one rule to rule them all. It doesn't work. Totally different communities. And we've never had problems from the model aircraft community, as seen by the guy in the UK who was a model aircraft flyer. He wasn't involved in this Gatwick thing. We need to treat the drone flyers as a separate community or a subgrouping.
Let's pretend we do treat them as a separate community just for a minute. We're just looking at GPS-equipped aircraft. You mentioned before, and I've heard many times, you definitely don't like registration. But if you want the signal to be unspoofable, you need to track it back to something that is part of a registration system. So do you think it is possible to have transponders that are unspoofable without registration? How do you solve for that?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't care what they do to the drone operators. If I bought a Phantom 4, I would be happy to register and be or whatever, and to have a transponder on board. But that's not what people are proposing. The regulators are proposing anything that flies and is remotely controlled will have a transponder and stuff. I'm not going to be pilloried for the crimes of the idiots. And so that's why I say I would never register, because the type of craft I fly do not need to be, there's no point in registering them because I will never have a transponder with a GPS on it to tell anyone where it is. So as far as the drone community goes, yeah, register the shit out of them and you know, put 10-pound transponders on their craft to limit the flight times. I don't care. But when it comes down to people who fly model aircraft and racing drones and things, different kettle of fish. Don't burden them with registration. It will serve zero purpose. It will simply be, you know, a burden on them for things that they haven't done wrong.
Right, I'm going to speak for the people that fly camera drones. I would take issue with a transponder system that was readily spoofable. Because the thing that would be most awful things happen, and that's been highlighted this week. Imagine being done for a crime essentially you've not committed, that someone does it with their drone, having spoofed your drone, and it's your door that gets kicked down. So I would definitely want any system that's introduced to be sort of the best solution we can come up with, not the easiest and cheapest. You know, it's got to be something that ultimately works and has some safeguards there. I'm not quite sure quite how you get to that, because I don't know enough on the technology that's there, but I know for certain, obviously. Go on.
The famous black box.
Yes, hang on. I've got a black box here. I can fit this to any one of your devices for a small fee.
You all know that the black box now is not black, it's orange.
No, that's a come on. This is the new black box. This is the one you want. I know for a small consideration.
That one fit on the 90 QX 90 drone. The thing is, okay, you want to get the registration of everything you do, because cars in Europe are going to get that safety system that if the car crashes will
B2B.
Yeah. And so drones having that, like Bruce says, if they don't have a GPS, I don't see much use of it. So the easiest way is forbid every drone that does not have a GPS, or forbid every drone that does not comply with the rules.
Let me just challenge that. For drones that don't have GPS, would it make sense to still have something that was a registration that was still pinging and saying, I'm here? I don't know exactly where I am, but you know roughly where it is based on
RF.
The RF. Yeah. At least that way in the Gatwick situation, there's nothing that's pinging. Yes, there is still possibility of a rogue actor to go and put something up and not have a transponder on it. I get it. But then does that then make it easier from an enforcement perspective to say, this drone doesn't have a transponder, you're gone?
But I think we can all put, but what that word enforcement, it could happen now. That's the missing word in all of this, not transponder, it's enforcement. It could be happening now based on YouTube and based on just going to a park. Sorry, I was ranting at you a bit there, but that's
the thing is, okay, if your drone does not comply with the rules, and the rules are drawn upon something that, for instance, a commercial player can easily comply, so that you cannot operate that drone legally, periods. And the problem is solved. Politicians usually go for the easiest routes. So if your drone does not comply with X, Y, and Z, it's not a drone. You cannot operate it. If you are seen operating it, you're in immediate transgression and jail, period.
So does that also then applies to my 2-meter balsa wood and tissue free flight glider?
That if you're not operating that glider within the confines of an approved model airfield, yes.
Let's just shoot all the children as they're born, because they could end up having fun, and we couldn't allow that.
Yeah,
I think though there's Gary mentioned that maybe the horse has bolted, that people will say that RC isn't that different now. I mean, there are a few ways you could deal with it if you don't have a transponder on board, because really less important of where the drone is to the police is where's the pilot. Now, a lot of your RC controls these days do have GPS in them, or you could actually have that as part of legislation that says you can't have an RC remote that doesn't have a GPS in it. So it could be pinging you as a pilot and where you are, because that's what's more concerned to the police, of where are these pilots. So if they see some misbehaviour, they can rock up in the police car and catch them in the act. And to be honest, from my viewpoint of me worrying about people being spoofed, I'd prefer that any ID systems also saying where the pilot is, and that's the critical information, because I'd want for evidence for you to catch the pilot in the act, i.e. you've got them there in a field, wherever, RC remote in their hand. Because if with the stolen car, people say, yes, you can clone the registration plate. Yes, you can. But if I commit a bank robbery and I'm the getaway driver, the police are still following that car on the street. So when they pull it over, the driver they drag out is the one that's committed the crime. Whereas if you're spoofing something and you don't know where the location of the pilot is, that's where you've got the disconnect. You've just got, oh, well, that was up in the sky and it says it's you. And the police have never had to turn up and actually grab you. And I think they should still have to go and get you. And then you've actually got a watertight case, as it were, if you see what I mean.
So Ian, better to arrest everyone that has a cell phone, because you can control lots of model drones with cell phones. You don't need anything else besides a cell phone to control and.
Yeah, I think that'd be perfectly reasonable. I don't think they're very practical to control with, but yes, if that was actually doing the GPS pinging, that'd be fair enough. And again, I know that you can see that.
The real drone threats are not from remotely controlled drones, but from autonomous with waypoints, which are immune to all the anti-drone technologies. And this is not going to do anything because they don't have a pilot. He just sets it going and there's no transmitter going. It's all on its own. But I think what we're looking at here, again, we're building our own hysteria. Please, can someone list for me all the instances where model aircraft and radio-controlled drones and whatever, recreational drones have been used to kill people or to inflict serious injury on purpose or to commit heinous crimes other than perhaps crashing into prison yards.
We agree with you. We agree with you, Bruce. We've also got to work out how do we get rid of or how do we manage the hysteria and still be able to fly. It's a bit of both. We agree with you.
Oh, well, education has been mentioned a lot. It's all part of there, and we need to be doing the messaging. We'll never see BV loss, says Ryback. We will, and we're seeing it already in Africa. Don't worry, it'll come. And G36 pilot remote ID of any sort will not stop NASA violations, but will assist with the post-incident investigation of inadvertent violators. And Ryback also said earlier, and quite correctly so, everything is spoofable, which it is. That is, if it's electronic, if man has made it, another man can break it. Yes. That's for sure.
I think that's fair enough. It's just a case of we come up with something where we know it's very difficult and it's not going to be commonplace. And you're not just going to be downloading something straight off the internet that has you doing it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's why I think we have to separate the camera drones from the model aircraft hobby. Already the regulators have done it by saying sub 250, not a risk. Well, how about saying no GPS, not a risk?
You weren't at the meeting. The meeting, I'm going to have to find out the year, but the meeting has happened, unfortunately. And that's part of the education piece, though, is as much as the RC model community kicks and shouts and hates and says, we're not drone pilots, we're not whatever, we're nothing to do with them, they've got to get on board with the thinking and realize that, well, sadly, that meeting's happened and you are, right or wrong, you are. Maybe AMAs, BMFAs and all that can start shouting loud enough to get that changed. Maybe if the thing doesn't have a GPS on board, then in fact my free flight glider was a really bad example, because that is not a UAS, because that cannot be controlled from the ground in 3-axis and sustain flight. It can if it hooks into a thermal, but I'm out of the loop. So a free flight glider, it can fly all day. It's not a UAS. But as soon as you add the RC, it would be.
They do bring in like compulsory transponders. Obviously, there's going to be a limit to the size of craft you can put them on, and I will simply ship flying smaller craft. Like if they brought in registration with a 250-gram cutoff, I would fly 249-gram craft. And when a policeman sees me flying my 249-gram craft in public, and he gets his thing out and he doesn't find a transponder signal from it, what's he going to do? He doesn't know how much it weighs. Will he arrest me for flying a drone illegally? How many other people will that happen to? It is a dog's breakfast, and I don't think anything that's been proposed by ourselves or the authorities or governments is even close to coming to the right solution.
Well, unfortunately, the people that are doing a lot of the suggesting are people that can afford to go to the meetings that we can't afford to go to, because they're trying to hawk a product at those meetings, a product or a service, and they're the people at the meetings. They're the people with the cash, and that's what your governments are hearing. That's what your ministers are hearing. You're hearing, oh, that sounds very nice, and look at the look at the headlines that were, these were the CUS systems that defended Gatwick. Like, no, they weren't. You know, that was just utter marketing bull dust. And in actual fact, anyway.
Okay, but then look, because of the registration and 250 grams and all that, in Portugal we will have the registration for 250 grams and mandatory insurance from 900 grams. And this 900 grams is not something that smart Portuguese legislator has come up with. It is a number that has appeared from outside. And if you look at the Mavic Pro drone, his overall weight was 906 grams. Curiously, the newest Mavic Pro, which is the professional, whatever version it is, all up weight 899 grams. Wonder who is paying attention to all the legislation around the world, because those 900 grams are going to come up to other countries, and people that are in the know are already taking reasonable measures to come up with alternatives. So, well, it's going to come up.
900 grams or 1 kilo. It's dropped that 100 grams because technology has improved. That came from bin 1 from AeroVironment in about 2006. Well, not actually from them, but their man who was on top of whichever committee it was now, I can't remember.
Yeah,
they had an exit. No, it was the American one. And the first bin was 1 kilo. I think it was something logical, like 1, 2, 3, 4 kilos for different bins. It was something like that. It was logical numbers. And a lot of the early stuff, and even back then, in the 2011-12s, DJI were taking note. That's why your Phantom was 1.2 and a bit fat, and then it dropped down in Mavic size. So quite where 900 came from, I don't know, but I know it's at first AeroVironment bins. So people have been thinking about that for a while, and sensible manufacturers have obviously been designing. Didn't the 250 grams come out of the Danish thing? Can anyone remember? Wasn't that a Danish study, I think?
I heard it was the US military thing to do with flak and the amount of injury could be caused by a certain mass at certain speeds. And so they just transferred it from the military books into this drone book so that if you get hit by a 250 gram drone, you're not going to die.
Yeah.
Much,
yes. Look, we've been ranting on for a long time. We better stop ranting and let people in the real world go to sleep and things like that. It's nearly 2 o'clock in the morning here. That's shocking. It's midday. Bruce is going to go and have lunch. That's what he's going to go and do. Dear viewers and people in the comments, thank you very much. I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas, and hopefully you're going to have a safe and happy new year and all those other good things. If you dared the 5-hour video instead of our chat last week, we'll do the same again on New Year's Day, because I'm going to do the other half of the year. And this time I'll try my best to make it actually happen on time. So thanks very much for watching. Normally it's 2100 GMT every Tuesday for our hangout full of nonsense, and we'll see you at, I should have worked out what date it is, but we'll see you in 2019. Have a very safe new year. Thanks very much for joining in. Cheers, everyone. Bye for now.
Yeah.
Bye. Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah, that'll do. Happy New Year.